Brad. Can you hear us?
Are you there?
Hello? It says Brad is on the air.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hey, we can hear you now.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just wondering why you don't believe in God. Hello?
Yeah. Because we don't see any good reason to believe in God.
Okay. Well, like how about like faith though?
How about it?
You know, as far as I can tell, faith can be used as an apparent justification for anything. Is there any position someone could take and then not say, "Oh, I just take this on faith"?
Right, but we all have faith in something.
No, we don't. See, this is an equivocation. I have trust and confidence in things, and I apportion my confidence. My confidence is proportional to the evidence for it. So I don't just have faith that this chair will hold me. I have a confidence level that the chair will hold me based on my understanding of physics and reality in the chair. If you want to call that, hang on. If you want to call that faith, I know that there is a colloquial, hey, you've all got faith. Okay, but that type of faith, if you want to use it that way, is not in any way similar to the type of faith that people are saying they're using to serve as a foundation for their belief in the supernatural or gods, because that is belief in the face, without supporting evidence and with evidence, in the face of evidence to the contrary. So you don't want to equate those two things.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to. I mean, that we all believe in things without evidence.
No. How is it I can just thoroughly explain that I have trust and confidence that is proportional to the evidence, and you can say we all believe things without the evidence?
Okay, so what evidence do you have that the world's real then? Or what evidence do you have that logic is true?
So you're talking about both the problems of hard solipsism and the foundations of logic. First of all, the logic is a presupposition. The foundations of logic, I presuppose that, as is, that I'm expanding reality. You can call that a faith-based position. And I think you could potentially make an argument for it, but it's a matter of practicality. The laws of logic continually demonstrate their usefulness and reliability, and they seem to be true in all possible circumstances, and you would have to assume that they were true in order to try to demonstrate that they weren't. Similarly, I have the direct experience of experiencing a reality, and what you're saying is, how do you know that that's really the real reality? Well, I don't, and I'm not claiming that it is really the real reality. I'm saying I experience a reality, and I have to deal with the reality I experience within its framework and rules until somebody demonstrates otherwise. It is, to get back to the beginning of the show, for both of these, the null hypothesis, that there is not some greater reality that I'm not experiencing. There's no point to believe that until somebody demonstrates that's the case.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so could we talk about some pieces of evidence then?
For evidence for what?
The existence of God.
Which God?
Let's just say like a non-personal God for now, and then
I don't know what a non-personal God is.
Okay, well, like a classical deistic God.
Sure. Well, you can talk about it. Here's one of the things: the classical deistic God doesn't manifest in reality in any detectable way. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, how could you possibly have evidence for it?
Because it could be necessary.
How do you demonstrate? Okay.
Sorry.
You could try to demonstrate that it's necessary, but I thought you were talking about evidence.
Yeah, I would say like logical arguments could be considered evidence.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you were talking a bit earlier about like possibilities, and so like in terms of the ontological argument, like
that's great timing.
I'm forgetting which premises.
Sorry? Just let me. I will let you continue, I promise, but it's really good timing because as of today, my entire deconstruction of the ontological arguments is now available on YouTube. If you Google...
Yeah, I just finished watching it. It was interesting.
Cool.
So how can you demonstrate if something is possible or not? You were saying, like, the claim something is impossible needs a burden of proof, and the claim that something is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Or, sorry, I just lost. Okay, possible and impossible both require a burden of proof.
Sure.
Something's possible?
Yes.
So the null hypothesis would be Matt cannot pick up this empty Coke bottle. So that's the null hypothesis. And if my claim is it's possible for me to pick it up, boom, demonstrated the possibility of that.
Yeah, if you're watching the show, he just picked up an empty Coke bottle.
Awesome. So I want to let's try to pick an example that's more analogous to what I'm talking about. So let's not pick an action, but let's pick an object. So how would I demonstrate the possibility that an object exists?
What object?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about God. I mean, maybe object isn't the right word, but
you're asking the wrong people. You're asking me, how do I demonstrate that God is possible when I have no reason to think that God is possible? And the fact that you can identify... I'm
trying to say,
hang on. The fact that you can pick out something that we have difficulty demonstrating is possible is not in any way a response to this issue of possibility and impossibility. It's all about the object that you're picking.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about an action, though. Like, picking up the bottle is like an action.
I wasn't talking about an action. I was talking about the object.
Okay, but yeah. But you don't need to show it's possible that a Coke bottle exists, right? Because you can just show that it does exist.
Well,
that's one way to show
that's the
it's
demonstration. When you talk about, is it possible for a God to exist, demonstrate that it is in fact possible.
How do I do that?
That's not my problem. That's the whole... Brad, stop. No, not 1 second. Stop. That is my whole point. I say, demonstrate that it's possible for a God to exist, and the people who are convinced that a God exists say, how can I do that? I don't know how I could demonstrate. Then why the hell can you possibly believe it? If you have no idea how to demonstrate the possibility of the thing that you think is actually the case, that's your problem, not the problem of the people who aren't believing it.
No, I understand. I think we're getting confused here. I'm not saying, it's... I'm asking you because I think I can, but you don't find it very, convincing. So I just want to ask, is there a way to show that something possibly exists without demonstrating that it actually does exist?
Sure, I think somebody could show that there's a possibility of a certain type of planet with a certain type of atmosphere, and to say that it's possible for such a planet to form in our universe.
So how can you make that claim?
Because you would use the information that we have on current planets, and you would use the information that we have, I assume, with gravity and how planets form, to say that you could have a planet that has a predominant atmosphere of, whatever, nitrogen or something. Even if we hadn't necessarily found a planet like that, we could say that it seems to be something that this universe could actually produce. It doesn't mean that it has produced such a planet. It just means that there's no reason to there's no reason to think it's impossible, and based on what we do know, it seems like it is possible.
Yeah, this is how you derive a null hypothesis. Essentially, a null hypothesis would be it is not possible for a planet like this to actually exist. And then you use the evidence from what we understand about accretion tests and the formation of planets to show
here's
that
how it could happen.
The laws of physics do not render this impossible. As a matter of fact, they may render this likely and probable.
Exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. So for God, nothing about the laws of physics tell us that it's impossible.
That's not what I said.
That's not what I said either. I said based on what we know, we would have reasons to believe that it actually could happen.
Yes. We're back to...
Not just that it couldn't.
The mere fact that we can't show something is impossible doesn't mean it's possible.
And if we can't show... even not being able to show that it's impossible doesn't mean that it's not impossible.
Okay, so maybe I can do that then. So let me present another argument to show that what we know about the world seems to lend some credence. And then from there, we can use the modal ontological argument to derive that this being necessarily exists in our world then.
Well, no, we actually can't, but go ahead with the first part.
Okay. So why don't we take a look at one of the versions of the cosmological argument?
Which version?
Let's say we could say the Kalam, I guess.
Okay, what is the conclusion to the Kalam cosmological argument?
Right. So, could I talk about why I think the conclusion from there we can
Can you just answer the damn question? about what is the conclusion?
I know, but you're going to go on about how. Okay, all right. Therefore, the universe had a cause.
Cool. What does that have to do with the God at all? Was God in any premise or the conclusion?
No, but
okay.
Hello?
So now that means that you are using the conclusion from the Kalam as a premise in a different argument, right?
No. Do you think I could explain something really quick?
I don't understand how you could possibly say, and I know you've got your hackles up because I'm cutting you off, but here's the thing. You said, let's start with the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument I have objections to, but the conclusion of it is, therefore, the universe had a cause for its existence. We both agree.
Yeah.
The Kalam says nothing about God, does not include God or a thinking agent in its premises or its conclusion, correct?
Yeah, so
okay.
It's one part of many, so that's why.
So what I'm saying is, you wanted to use not the Kalam cosmological argument, but the conclusion of the Kalam as a premise in a new argument for the existence of God, correct?
Sure.
Yes, that's all I was asking, and you said no reflexively.
Okay, because I think you're thinking of the traditional Kalam, which I'm not using. So
there. Okay. You've got some new version of the Kalam. Does it end with a different freaking conclusion?
Well, I'm trying to imply things. Okay, okay. Yeah, let's just say yeah. So can we agree on the conclusion there, and then we can work from there?
I don't know, can you?
So I can't actually agree on the conclusion, but the point that I was making is this. If you say you want to argue for the existence of God and you want to begin with the Kalam, you can't do that. What you have to do is use the conclusion of the Kalam as a premise in a new argument, because your argument has to contain something about God, right?
Right. But
so then present that argument, not the Kalam.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I have that worked out in premise form, so that's why.
Okay. Then call us back when you do.
Okay. Well, I mean, you let lots of people go on and give their arguments, and I've never.
You just said you don't have it. I would be happy to let you continue, but you don't have it.
It's an informal argument. I haven't. You have to put it in premise form.
I'll tell you what. You got a minute and a half. Go.
Okay, so from the conclusion of the Kalam, we can derive that this cause is immaterial, powerful, transcendent, etc. And if we can agree on that, and then I would like to move on to a fine-tuning argument where I can show that this thing is most likely intelligent.
No. So what you're doing is the same thing that William Lane. You're not presenting anything new or novel. This is what William Lane Craig does all the time. Let me present the Kalam, and then from that I'll say, what kind of cause could it be? Well, it needs to be, immaterial and eternal and powerful and an agent and thinking, and none of those things are ever actually demonstrated. And the reason is we don't know what could have caused the universe. It's just a ball of assertions.
Well, it would have to be transcendent from the universe, correct?
So if, in fact, the universe had a cause that was external, of course it would have to be external.
Okay, and this thing must be immaterial and timeless. Right?
But we haven't demonstrated that the universe had a cause that was external. All that we've demonstrated from the Kalam, which, by the way, is also flawed, is that the universe has a cause.
Well, see, you've never let me present the Kalam argument. So my argument isn't that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Fine. Go ahead.
Began to exist.
You want to put money? Okay. You want to put money on this? Because that's my new thing. Is I'm willing to put money on this so that when people do exactly what I say they're going to do, after they deny that and claim they're going to do something different, the ACA gets donations from that.
Okay. What am I going to do?
Just go ahead.
Okay. So if the universe began to exist and it had a transcendent cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it had a transcendent cause.
I reject the first premise.
Okay, so why do you reject the first premise?
Because you haven't demonstrated that the universe beginning to exist and what that actually means with respect to our local presentation of the universe.
The second premise?
Your first premise was, if the universe began to exist, it had a transcendent cause for its existence.
Yeah, you were talking about the beginning of the universe, right?
That's in your first premise. What part? Are you not able to read the words? If the universe began to exist, right?
Right, but my second premise is the universe did begin to exist. You would object to the first premise if you were objecting to the causality or the transcendent causality.
Brad, your first premise If the universe began to exist, it had a transcendent cause. That is your first premise.
Yes.
I'm saying that has not been demonstrated to be the case. That if a universe begins to exist, that it necessarily has a transcendent cause. We don't know what type of cause might qualify to start a universe. It could be a non-transcendent cause. How did you rule that out?
Because everything we know about the world tells us that that's very likely not true.
Well,
can you give me a single example of something that caused itself to exist?
No, but I couldn't give you an example of a black swan until we found one either. That's the fallacy you're engaging in.
It's not. I'm trying to use our... Okay.
See, you can say it's not. I can say it is. Please demonstrate how it's not.
You cut me off before I could explain why.
Okay, why isn't it? Well, you know what? I'm not that concerned about what you think's fair.
Okay. Okay, so I was wondering, so you consider yourself an atheist, correct?
I don't just consider myself. I am.
Okay. So
I consider myself devilishly handsome. That may be up for disagreement, but I am in fact an atheist. I do not believe that a God exists.
Okay, so what evidence do you have for that?
I don't have to demonstrate that a God doesn't exist. I'm not claiming that a God doesn't exist or that this is a position. I do not believe that a God exists because there hasn't been sufficient evidence. This is the very first question you asked, which I answered immediately.
Right, well, that sounds like an agnostic. I mean, but wouldn't you have a burden of proof for your position?
What is my position?
Oh, you're an atheist.
What I know. What is my position? Because I'll bet you $1 you get it wrong.
Okay, well, I'm just, I mean, I don't know your...
I've already told you twice. That's why I'm willing to bet on it. I've told you twice now. I do not believe that a God exists. Does that mean...
Okay, so I'm going to read the definition of atheism from...
No, you're fucking not. You're not... Why?
Okay.
Definition from what? Dictionary.com?
No, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
So here's the thing. I don't give a rat's ass about what the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says the definition of atheism is, because dictionaries are not prescriptive. They do not tell you what words mean. They describe
common usage. Right?
Yes, and I just told you what I mean when I say atheist.
Okay. So you're redefining atheism.
No, I'm not redefining atheist. And a theist is somebody who believes that a God exists, right?
Yeah.
And an atheist is somebody who does not believe that a God exists, right?
An atheist is someone who does not believe. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. There you go.
All right. That sounds good.
Agnosticism and Gnosticism don't address belief, do they?
Well, I mean, it depends. Right?
No, they address they address knowledge. It's right there in the.
But why do you get to define the words however you want, and then when I try to say, well, not necessarily, and then you say, well, no.
I'm telling you how I use them. I'm also telling you what the common usage is.
Okay.
Could you be an agnostic theist, someone who believes that because knowledge is a subset of belief, right?
Oh, sure.
Why are you laughing and saying, oh, sure? Knowledge is a subset of belief, right?
Yes.
Okay. And therefore, if theism and atheism address belief, and Gnosticism and agnosticism address knowledge, then those become a subset of the belief, right?
Okay, so I just have a question then. What would you call someone who neither believes that God exists or that God does not exist?
Non-existent. Oh, wait a minute. Phrase that again, because you did something. You said there's somebody who doesn't believe God exists and doesn't believe God doesn't exist.
Yeah,
right?
as soon as they don't believe God exists.
You've already changed the usage. Theists believe God exists. Atheists do not believe God exists. This is not the same as believing God doesn't exist. It is these people are unconvinced that a God exists.
How about someone who holds no belief at all?
There is no such thing.
Well, no, but if somebody doesn't believe a God exists, they're the non-theist. They're the atheist.
They're an atheist. There's no middle ground between I believe and I do not believe, right? Those are the only two possibilities.
You accept it as true, or you have not yet accepted it as true.
Right, but that doesn't mean you have to accept either one.
No,
right?
yes, it does.
Well,
so here's the thing. Let me stop. This is really easy. A or not A, those are the only two possibilities, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe and I do not believe. Those are the only two possibilities, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you have to hold one of those, though.
if you just acknowledge that those are the only two possibilities, that everything either believes or does not believe, what's the other option? You are violating the law.
I didn't say hold on, no. I didn't say everyone either believes or not believes. I said that there's two possibilities. That doesn't mean every single person has to hold to one of those two possibilities.
Brad, you are not even listening.
Okay.
Listen. I believe or I do not believe. Those are the only two possibilities, correct? It's a direct logical negation. It is A and not A. I believe, I do not believe.
Okay, yeah.
Those are the only two possibilities, right?
Yeah, if you're holding a belief, yeah.
No, they're not. They are the only two possibilities. There's no not holding a belief.
What Matt is saying is there are the people that believe it, and then there's everyone else. And everyone else is people who don't believe it. So you're either among the people who believe it, or you're among the people who are not the people that believe it.
It seems a bit absurd then, because wouldn't that, I mean, I don't know, a house would be an atheist then, because a house does not hold
because
a belief
a house doesn't have the capacity for belief. What we're talking about here.
Now you're defining atheism even further.
If I use the word bald, what you're saying is, oh, well, a rock is bald. No, because bald applies to things which should or could have hair. And so you wouldn't call a house bald just because it doesn't have hair, because you're using bald to apply to things that have a capacity for hair. So when we're talking about beliefs, right, we all understand that what we're talking about are the things that have the capacity for beliefs.
You disagree with what?
So the definition of bald is having a scalp wholly, and the definition of scalp is the skin covering the head. So a rock doesn't have skin covering the head.
Okay.
So.
We have there's bald animals, that I mean, you could be bald. There's a dog could be bald on its butt.
Right, and I would call a dog bald.
But it's not on. It's not. Bald. It doesn't have hair on its. It could have hair on its skull, but not on.
But however you define bald, everything is either bald or not bald. Correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm just saying,
everything either believes or does not believe, correct?
Right. So the pen I'm holding right now is an atheist.
No, the pen you're holding now does not believe. Atheist is a thinking agent who could potentially believe that does not believe.
Okay.
It's basic set theory. It's basic set theory. We just never got past the first damn thing.
Can I plug Austin Klein's about.com, atheism, agnosticism, about.com website? He has some really good articles on the definitions of atheism going back to the 1800s all the way through different sources so that people can see how varied and broad the definition of atheism is and has been for centuries.
And the big thing is, as I pointed out in another video, I don't care what label you put on it. We need to be talking about the concept. So there's a claim. Some God exists. Everyone either accepts that claim or they don't. There's another claim. No God exists. Everyone either accepts that claim or they don't. What you're trying to do is say that atheists accept the second claim, and what I'm pointing out is that they reject the first claim. The null hypothesis is that no God exists until such God has been demonstrated. The default position is rejection and disbelief of a claim until it has met its burden of proof. It is not a responsibility of atheists who are rejecting the claim that a God exists to then prove that God doesn't exist.
Okay. So, I mean, do you want to move on to other callers, or can I ask another question?
I'll let you ask another question.
I mean, maybe it might be too big to get into, but
if it is, we'll move on.
What's your do you think the fine-tuning argument is one that holds any weight? Like, I feel like it would hold at least some, even like in a Bayesian sense.
Okay, so
because it's more likely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go finish.
Well, yeah, I think it's more likely under theism that we would see the various fine-tuning of constants.
Yeah, Blake and I had this conversation. In order to determine that something is more likely given X, you have to have some understanding of whether or not X is possible, whether or not X is probable, in order to compare how likely it is as an explanation of something else. If we have no demonstration that theism is possible or probable, then how can you say it's the best explanation?
Well, because if the various margins for the fine-tuning contents were very small and not like extraordinary as we see them, that could be considered. I mean, if that were true,
this is an argument.
Would be weak.
No, this is an argument that the fine-tuning of the apparent fine-tuning of the universe seems so unlikely. Therefore, we are justified in leaping to a supernatural explanation with no demonstration that it's possible or probable. This is, I've already, when I did my video on fine-tuning, I can deal cards out and you'll get all 13 spades. That's incredibly unlikely. It's a perfect bridge hand. We know it has happened in bridge tournaments at least once, I believe, even though there have not been enough hands of bridge played to exhaust all possible combinations.
Yeah.
So if I dealt you 13 spades, and we talked about this yesterday, is it more likely that it was an honest deal, or that I cheated, or that God gave you 13 spades?
I guess it would depend on your prior credence for the likelihood that a God exists, I guess, and the various conditions around that dealing.
Okay. How do you determine how likely it is that a God is going to give you 13 spades?
Well, I guess that would be based on the other... Go away. I guess that would be based on the other various evidences for God.
I'm still waiting on any evidences for God. What I keep getting is arguments and fallacious appeals that something is so improbable that therefore we're justified in thinking that a God exists. That's simply not true.
It's not an absolute knockdown argument, but I think we should admit on some level that it does have some makes God slightly more likely.
How can it make something like a God more likely?
Well, because the likelihood under atheism is just, or no God, is just so small that, I don't really see.
Really? Okay, so what other universes do you have to investigate? How do you know that this isn't the only possible way that a universe could have formed?
Right, so what we know about these constants is that they're not that way for any, they're not fixed. There's a whole batch of arguments of why they're not fixed, but they could easily be another way. Everything we know about physics tells us that there's nothing necessary about these laws instead of another set of laws.
Well, see, I find this incredibly problematic because we have exactly one universe to investigate, right? We know how things are.
Okay, but there are certain constants that we can look at and see, well, okay, this one actually does, the likelihood of it being like this is actually quite high because there's not a lot of other options. But for some of them, you can look and see, well, there's no reason at all. So
there may be some that this is the only option for that factor.
Oh, yeah.
How can we determine that it's not the case for all of them?
Well, okay, because okay, so the conditions under that one that make it likely aren't there for the other one.
I don't know how you can... First of all, you're not answering the question, but I don't know how you can talk about likely. How many universes do we know of?
Okay, so I think the huge problem here is, I guess you're a frequentist. I think
the huge problem here is that you can't address a question without trying to label it.
Well, because
all I asked was how many universes we have.
Right, because you're okay, but I know where you're okay. So as far as we know, one.
You know what, Brad? I'm done. Because all I asked was how many universes we have, and your answer, as far as we know, one. Why would we talk about universes that we don't know about? I asked what the actuality was, and you can't even just say one.
Well, okay, but I don't have infinite knowledge, right? So
The question was, how many universes do we know about? Not how many universes actually exist, or how many universes, exist. You're done. You're done. No, you're done. The question was not how many universes does an infinitely knowledged being know about. It's how many universes do we know about? It's not a trick question. It's one. Now, Douglas Adams gave a really great response to this idea of the anthropic principle in fine-tuning, that if a puddle gained consciousness and looked around, it would find, hey, look at this hole. It's perfectly shaped to me. Right? A complete inversion, that the water fit what the hole was. Similarly, when we talk about these things, people say, oh, it's amazing that the universe just seems so fine-tuned for us. Well, first of all the best evidence points to the fact that we evolved to fit the universe that we find ourselves in. Additionally, Hawking has pointed out that if the universe is fine-tuned for anything, it seems to be fine-tuned for the creation of black holes, which is antithetical to life. And we know that the vast majority of the universe is also antithetical to life. That there are the building blocks of life all over the place, but if I just stick you, I don't even have to stick you out in space, I can just hold you underwater for a while. The idea, oh, look, it's all comes together just for us, is so monumentally arrogant. But then to say, I just can't imagine how this could have happened unless there was a creator, and that makes a creator likely, is fallacious, no matter how unlikely it is. You need to demonstrate that it's actually impossible in order to say that that a creator is necessary. You don't get to necessity by saying, oh, this is unlikely. You get to necessity, which is an absolute, by showing that the alternative is in fact impossible. And if all your argument is that it's unlikely, therefore that raises the probability of God, you are wrong. Demonstrably, fallaciously wrong. Doesn't raise the possibility. Would it also raise the possibility of universe creating pixies? Wouldn't it raise the possibility of any other explanation that is sufficient to explain this? This is the problem when you say, oh, of course it seems like God is the answer because you have invented a panacea. You have a being that can do anything, and therefore it will be a sufficient explanation for anything. But it will never be a necessary explanation until you demonstrate it. So when you say, in a completely abstract, or not in a philosophical context, is it possible for an all-powerful being to create a universe? Of course. You've defined a being that can do this. It's incredibly frustrating to just. How many universes do we have? How many universes do we know about? One. I stole that straight from you. I don't know why I didn't just shut up and let you do it.